because she tried, and he shut her down. If she tried to say something, he'd shut her down. She learned early in their marriage to behave, or else.
Because it's a woman's
He could
choice.
go see somebody else.
That's right.
And he would. And he didn't need my mom crying and telling him about her sorrows or her feelings or her jealousy, and he could go somewhere else. And that was very clear. And that's what women learn, is that, you know, he can escape, and you want to be treated good, then you better treat your husband good, because he can just go somewhere else where someone will treat him better.
I've seen this exact thing all of my life. And the sorrow really comes, I see the women that have dedicated their life to their husband and to their suffering.
Oh, yeah.
And to their dedication to their scary God. And then they age out when they no longer have children, and their husband doesn't come to them anymore anyway, because he has young wives and he's not going to do it.
That happens a lot, too.
And I've seen that. It's very, very sad. And it's really very, very common. Because when they're young, they know he can always go to someone else. As they start aging out, they know he always will go to someone else. Now he can, he's going to.
Other wives, he will. He will go there into somebody else.
Yes.
And some of it, I look at my mom and dad's relationship in their elderly years before they died, before they passed, as being a comfort. It was like, okay, now we're all out of those young wives who are childbearing, and sex isn't a big deal anymore, and so what kind of attitudes with all these older women and older moms and older dads. And who was the comfort person who put up with all my dad's abandonment, no matter what he wanted to do to her, or leave from her, or take from her, or steal from her to give to some other wife? And I mean, not literally, but so-and-so needs that more than you do, and so-and-so wants your home, so I want you to move downstairs, and so-and-so needs money, so I want you to move in their house so that they can have the money. And my mom was always like, so guess who did get the brownie points in the end? My mom. My dad would always go over there when nobody else, when they had other lives, when the women had created their life, because dad was always gone. He could go sit with my mom, who would hold his hand and rock with him and not say a word, where it was peace and quiet. So you can have him, if he had younger wives who were still having, and had he been childbearing, you know, at that age of amorous or whatever, that's probably where he'd have been. But no, when it's all was said and done with my mother, she was still the one who he respected for letting him walk all over her. It was like, what? This does not make sense. It's like your respect, a woman's respect, comes from how subservient you are. Her dad's love was because, and he said it, your mother was always an angel. Your mother always did whatever I needed her to do. It was like, okay, that's her glory. That's what she wanted. That's what she got. You know? How sad. Miserably happy.
My father's last wife was younger than many of his daughters. And so he spent his last years of his life with only her. And he actually told one of his wives, who had dedicated all of her life to him, all of her dedication to him, all of her work to him, and being his, what should I say, doting wife.
They call it helpmate, right? Helpmate?
Being his constant helpmate, and raising her children and other children that were his. And he actually told her that she'd outlived her usefulness because she was no longer of childbearing years, and he moved her out of her home and moved her in a little tiny house next door where she could look out every day and see him with his young wife.
And that's how, in the home he moved her out of?
He moved her, yes.
Out of her home?
Out of her home, and put her in the little house, and lived in the big house with his young wife, where she could see every day them living happily together, and she had outlived her usefulness, and he was very, very demeaning to her.
These stories are more common than anybody wants to know. And women, the older women are just outcasts. They were animals, they were breeders anyway, and they can't have kids, and there's no younger use, and they're not as attractive, and I don't care anymore, and I've got other things and more important things. And I've also even though my father ended up hanging with Mom, I thought, you did not treat her good in her younger years. You used, you abused, you walked all over her in the name of her being the martyr to you and kissing your ass, and now you want her still, you know, you want to come back and say, I loved you. On the other end, I hear honestly more of what you're saying about the women being cast out. I have a new wife. I have a younger wife. I have a more mature wife, or a bossy wife, or an educated wife, or somebody who's going to give to me again, give back to what I want and who I am, the man, the ego, the male ego, the leadership thing. And,
I have a woman that's feeding my ego, and it isn't you.
Yeah, and it's no longer you.
Right.
You've outdone that, and you don't do that for me anymore.
I knew one family very, very well. I knew a lot of them well, but in this particular case, the first wife was barren. So the husband marries the second wife and has 10 or 12 children by her. I don't remember how many now. And the first wife had to go to work and support all of that family while her husband was taking on other wives. She had to support all of her sister's children and watch her sister bear all the children she never had and take on the financial responsibility of raising all of those children all of her life. And while her husband was actually creating more children with everybody else. If she would go to work and come home and work with her sister and her kids, and she dedicated her life to basically supporting her husband's children, and she never had any. And he kept taking younger and younger and younger wives, and he reached a point where he got tired of polygamy, denied it, and ran off with a young woman when he was an old man, and left them all.
Yeah.
That really happened.
I can think, as you're speaking, I thought of 4 or 5, and the one I don't know personally, but it was a story. 4 personally people that I know that happened to. Almost the identical story.
Right.
Husbands having all these other wives, and the wife, the first or second or whatever, that didn't have them, who was required. And you know what? There we go, kind of back to that payoff and the martyrdom thing. I remember 2 of those women so grateful and bragging about, this was the way God knew they weren't going to be able to have children, so this is the way I got my children, and I'm grateful to support him, and I'm grateful for this, and I'll be the martyr, and I'll bring home all the money, and I'll help with my sister wives. And they, again, their belief system told them that was your part of suffering, and you'll be rewarded in heaven as long as you keep on doing that. Watch him have babies, watch him, you know, procreate and have children with all these other women, or even a few women, or whatever. But I'll do my part, and that's why what I was required and set to God. Oh, and he must have put me in this plural family, because that way I could have all these children for a better stay. You know, all the justification. I remember sitting around many, many times thinking about, why are we polygamous wives? Let's see, well, first of all, we're required to do it. That's number 1. We're required to have as many babies as we possibly can. That's why. Let's see, what else? Oh, yeah, we're supposed to get over our jealousy and our dross and our natural God-given feelings, but we didn't believe they were, because we're supposed to get over them. Let's see, what else can we think of? We got to think of more so we can do this. Let's see, what else? Oh, yeah, and I don't like him. I don't want him at home. Wait, I do like him, but I don't have to fix his meals. I don't have to make all those wonderful, delicious meals that we talked about before, and kiss his ass and take his shoes off and rub his feet and do all that stuff. Well, if we could get more wives, I'd only have to do that. I mean, you just made up reasons, for heaven's sake. She made up reasons. And now I'm so grateful that I don't have to do that with my husband. He can take care of himself. And I can go and come, he's not sleeping with anybody else. And this is the best life ever.
You're in a normal relationship now.
We have a normal, monogamous, wonderful, incredible, awesome
partnership. You're very wicked. You
Yes.
have left polygamy.
Oh, yeah. That's the best thing ever. And you know what? The sister wife thing, that we would sit around and say that. One of my sister-in-laws said, and you should go on a cruise with me. And she says, and I'm not that age anymore where I used to be jealous like when I was younger, and so we can go on this cruise. And I said, hey, I don't have to. I'm going on a cruise with you and not worry about who my husband's sleeping with when I'm gone. I don't have to even think about it, let alone, care. He's not going to be sleeping with other women. The thing is, all but the damnation one were ones we made up in our head that didn't fit. The friendships between sister wives that they claim wouldn't be otherwise. I'm sorry, I do not buy that. I think they're friends. I really believe it in most cases. In many cases, they're really friends. But I've got the most incredible, like I said, relationships. They're real, genuine, loving, compassionate relationships. It doesn't matter what I said, didn't say, whatever, they're going to love me unconditionally. And guess what? They aren't sleeping with my husband. We're best friends. And I don't have to share them with my husband. So the things that we made up of why this is all great, made up.
You pointed out the friendship in the wives. It's been my experience over the years in watching the wives that when they really become friends is after they've gone through a similar hell together. In other words, the first and second wife usually bond when he takes the third. They bond in their pain.
Yeah.
I've seen women bond in their poverty because the only way they can get along is to rely on each other or they're going to starve. And this was the case of these two sisters, where one went to work to support all of her sister's children because she couldn't have any. She bonded with her sister, and her sister bonded with her.
Were they full-blooded sisters?
Yes, and they
right,
could not survive without each other. But they didn't bond with any other wives. I've seen polygamous wives bond when they were both older and they were both abandoned.
My dad's wife, I watched that, of course, growing up in the group and watched them at the property and, of course, being with my mother so often. They definitely got closer. The older they got, the closer they became friends and hung out and defended each other and were there to help with meals and help. And when my mom was dying, they were there. And when another wife was dying, they were there to be friends. And they had worked on that relationship all their lives. Why not? They worked toward that friendship and that bond. But when they were younger was when, and I was very young, it was when I was seeing all kinds of shit flying around, and bad mouthing and talking and jealousy. And it's like you said, when the wives get older and they don't care so much about sex anymore, and they don't care so much about the childbirth anymore, and they don't care so much, and they're in a sense put on the shelf. And I know my dad had younger wives, some younger than his children, and I think he still tried to be equal on time, as good as he could, but where his little heart was for many years of his later years of his life. So I agree with you on that. I think that there's reasons that they become close. For me, it was because you are expected to be close to your sister wife, and in fact, you are on watch. You are on scrutiny. Everyone knew that. Everybody knew that everybody in the group is watching you when you get a new wife, when your husband takes a new wife, to see how well behaved you will be. And if you're not, then it's like, what a bitch she is. Or if you're jealous, it's like, oh, we hope she gets over that. And if she's really, and if you can put on that smile and act like everything's wonderful, then they're going, oh, look, we're so proud of her. So being real again, it's not okay to be real. It's let's see how good she can behave, or at least show how, cover it, instead of being real and genuine. And if I had been real, and if it was really, really, really choice, I would have been sobbing and crying and throwing up when the marriage took place, instead of acting like I was all happy and perfect wife.
I'm going to talk about real with these two sisters, one working to support the other. During their youth, I could see the angst and the pain between them. It was palpable. They didn't really bond until he went off with the third younger wife. And I have never seen sisters, and I have a lot of them, that two sisters will be married to the same guy. And I got a huge family, okay? I've never seen sisters married to the same guy that liked each other. They put on a big front in public. They put on all hugs, everything. I love you, and they hate each other. The passive-aggressive hatred is, you can just feel it. It's just unreal. And yet, by the time they're abandoned, when he's off with young women, when they can no longer have children, then and only then do they cross it, if they ever cross it. My father's wives never were friends. It never happened. Absolutely never happened. He had 6 wives, and it never happened. But my father, in his old age, tried to recapture his youth with a young woman and was very brutally, verbally cruel to his women.
Yeah. Again, I'm sure personalities play into all of this, into every single bit. But the bottom line that you and I know is that polygamy is a human rights violation. There are numerous studies that show that prove that it's unfair, that it completely causes all kinds of emotions and poverty and depression and arguing and insecurities and lack of education. I mean, there's no end to the statistics that have been found in studies and research. And I don't think, and in saying all of that, because people ask me, do you think there can really be a happy polygamous family? I've yet to meet one. I'll be 61 in November, and I have yet to meet one. In all of the polygamous families that I've ever known around me in all my life, in all those years, 50 years of growing up in polygamy, and around hundreds of families, and in all of those who've left, and all the stories I've heard, I have yet to hear a real story. I mean, that you can see and visualize and know is true, other than the conforming unhappy, the blinded bliss, or my mom that I call miserably happy. I mean, I've not seen a genuinely happy plural family. And I would like to. There was one family that I believed it was happy. All my life, I thought, oh my gosh. In fact, I even thought if my husband were to die, I'd want to marry that man because his family looks so happy. And I was like holding on to that one for dear life because I thought, wow, at least there's one happy family. And as soon as my sister left, she started telling me about that family that she knew intimately. And it was just the same as we talked about before, the backbiting, the heartaches, the sadness, the depression, the guilt, the fights. I remember, because I was at the time, still in the group, and I remember just being devastated. It's like, there's nobody. Now there's not even one example anymore of genuine, true happiness. You kiss butt, you act happy, you put on that smile, and everybody thinks you are. You have to. And I thought I was. And all the people that are in really believe they are. Oh, I wouldn't say all of them think they, because some of them know how miserable they really are.
Well, it's happy martyrdom.
It's happy martyrdom. It's miserable. It's blinded bliss. Miserable happiness. That's the best way to describe polygamy to me is you put it up with, and they're willing to because they've been told to forever. I did. My mom did. Her mom did. My grandpa was an abusive man. She put up with it for 7 generations on my father's side. Above me, 6. And they put up with it because they believed they had to for salvation. That was it. It was required. It wasn't about choice.
And their holiness and their martyrdom is, I can suffer better than you can suffer, therefore look at me. I have a smile on my face. As I know, I will never have my own lover. I will never have romance in my life. I will never be important enough not to be cast aside. Mm-hmm. I will never have real security. I am not worthy of love.
Mm-hmm. And there's a payoff for all of that. And that's that promise of blessings in heaven that they believe and buy into. That's the only payoff. That's the only thing that makes it worth it, is if you can buy into that big fat lie. That's the sad part to me, is that they think and believe, like I did, that this is a requirement, that it has to be done, and that I have to conform, and I have to suffer, and I have to endure, and I have to have all these kids, and I have to go through whatever is required of me to have an eternal happiness and salvation.
Where I will spend eternity sharing my husband with millions of wives and having less and less of his time and having babies throughout eternity whenever he wants, and be eternally lonely, eternally empty, and eternally unworthy of my own mate and
I
love.
don't think anybody's ever asked that question. What are those blessings? What's going to be any different in this
The difference
health,
is
in this life, in this health, than the next life?
The difference is you'll have a crown with jewels in it for all of your children, and you will have servants. And you know, when I realized
Wait,
that...
I still have to have all those other babies, the spirit
all
babies.
those spirit babies forever. And when I realized what was facing me in eternity, I thought, I can't see an end to the hell.
Really?
I can't see an end to the suffering. I can't see an end to pretending I have no heart, no soul, and become a zombie with no feelings. And when I feel no more, and I care no more, and I can not care where he is or what he does, or care about him, somehow I'm purified, I'm dead.
Yeah, exactly.
I am no longer a human being.
Mm-hmm.
I am now a zombie.
Yeah. Robotic.
And that is
zombie
my
person.
eternal reward in my fundamentalist, polygamist heaven.
Very good.
And so I thought, if that is heaven, please, dear God, count me out.
Very good. Exactly. So thank goodness for the hundreds of people who are awakening to true love, light, and happiness.
Every single human being needs to be cared about and loved and know they're special. They all need a sense of belonging. A sense of belonging has with it a sense of security. You can't have that in polygamy. It's wicked for you to have that. You must sacrifice that.
Oh, yeah.
We were taught that the women and the children belong to the men for time and all eternity. The women do not have the children. They don't belong to the women. They belong to the men. Therefore, if we left, we would lose our children.
Yeah.
We were also taught that God sacrificed his son for the betterment of the world. But I was taught that we had to sacrifice a child if we were asked, if we ever wanted to gain godhood, which meant that if our daughters were taken away too early, we must capitulate and do what the prophet said, even though they were way too young for marriage, no matter what the age group, because God required that sacrifice as his son was given for our sake. This meant that there are many polygamous women that I know today that tell me they were in the room when a little girl was born, promised on the day of her birth to a certain friend. That little girls were 5, 9, 11, promised in marriage, and sometimes went to live in the home of their future husbands, to be trained to be the wife that they should be. And the women had to accept that, because if they did not give their child, they were sinning, because God had given Jesus to the world to die, and they were simply giving this child in honor to a prophet or a priesthood man. When they had to give up their sons at 13 years old and throw them out of the group because they listened to rap music, because they smiled at a girl. The real reason was because they were going to be in competition for the young wives coming up.
They were getting fewer and fewer girls, young girls, the 15-year-olds married. Now we got to go to the 14s, and there's not enough. And now we go to the 13s, and there's not enough. And we have all these boys who need wives, and they're gone. There's not enough, and they're ours. And we're the older men and the prophets, and we get them. And so let's get rid of these boys. They've all done something wrong with that, and we'll figure it out. Of course, God told them that, you know. God told Warren that they were all bad.
Most of these young marriages were revelations, of course.
Yeah.
And my father ordered me to bring my daughters back so he could place them in polygamous marriages. He said, oh, he would not resurrect me from the grave if I didn't. Not God, my father would not resurrect me from the grave. I think that the general person out there has no consciousness of what the massive and elaborate prison of the mind is created in the doctrine of polygamy. It destroys men and women alike, and controlled by the prophet. And you can spell that any way you want to.
It is. That's definitely is a prison of mind. Unless you've been born and raised and indoctrinated, you don't get it how how hard it is to leave, how terrifying it is to leave, the persecution and everything you lose, everything you have, your family, your children. I love my husband. I encouraged him to marry another woman, to sleep with another woman, because that's how I'd have my kids in the hereafter. At first it was my husband. Then when I had kids, you know how women are with their children. I would have done anything I could for them.
To keep them.
And it was to keep them.
Of course.
And to be with them forever. And that was my commitment. It was like, I have to do what I'm supposed to do. And it was so indoctrinated, so entwined in my whole life, and not just in this life. For me, in this life, but in generations of this, do it or else, do it or else. And so you were right. People have no concept in general about how heavy that is, how hard and how heavy and how holding and how gripping that is, and how people can say, yeah, this is my choice. Well, of course it is. Like I said before, I have to do this or else. This is my choice to live this way, and I'm damn happy doing it, because I'm going to get to heaven and get my kids.
Yeah, if you don't do it, I'll lose my salvation. I'll be damned to time on eternity, and I'll never have my children again.
That's how they perceive
or my
choice.
family.
That's it.
And that's why a lot of them cast each other out now. You're going to be cast out if you didn't accept it, so you might as well do it now. Mm-hmm. And that's why a lot of them do that. Kristyn, where we grew up, it was our responsibility as women to unite as sister wives and love each other, because if a man did not have a certain number of united wives, we could not be saved in the celestial kingdom. When I was young, my family told me those united wives had to be 7. Some men said it had to be 3. But it's interesting, after they had 3, they still had to have 7, and etc. But anyway, the women had to unite, or the family could not make it to the celestial kingdom, and so indirectly they became responsible for their husband's salvation as well as their own.
I love that you said that the way you did too. It's like, well, 3 wasn't enough. It's like, starts out in the doctrine somewhere, and I haven't researched it in a long time. I used to remember what it was, but 3 I say this a lot to people, get your big toe in the door. If you barely have 3 united wives, and they have to be united, like you said, and then jumped from 5 to 7, and then to 12, and you have to have 12 or so to be the prophet, and 12 or more, and so therefore the rush to hurry and get 12 so you be the big wig leader for many. Not only are you accurate on the united wives, and we have to do that, we're accountable for that, and so therefore again, shut up and behave yourself and keep sweet, but women, I was also told over and over, and so was all the women around me, who reminded me that if I didn't have a good husband, it was my fault, because I was to fast and pray and read the scriptures until he became a better man. That was also on my head and on my sister wife's head and on all the other wives' heads, is that if they didn't have what was considered a righteous, good husband, then it was our fault, because we weren't praying hard enough, and we weren't fasting long enough, and we weren't being good enough for our husbands to be this righteous, good man. And behind every good man is a good woman, or 2, or 3, or 10, or 12. Therefore, the women are again accountable for everything that goes wrong. So I would think everything. I cannot think of anything in that religion. Anything. If the children go astray, I'm accountable.
That's right.
Even though their dad might not have ever been around to help. I'm just saying that.
That's true. That's true. That's what they tell us.
If I don't behave, let's see, it's my fault, of course, too. Anything and everything that could go wrong, it was the women's fault, and it still is. You just shut up. The women are to shut up, behave themselves, keep sweet, endure to the end, do whatever your husband says, do whatever God says, which is allow him to have all these sex partners, and and if something goes wrong, it's still our fault. They'll find the way to make it your fault if it isn't.
I want to thank you for helping to enlighten so many people. Your voice is important, and all the beautiful voices that come across your radio station are important. And I'm really proud of you, Kristyn, for what you do. Thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you.